My next two guests are members of Congress from New York, a state that early on bore the total brunt of this coronavirus pandemic. Representative Yvette Clarke is the vice chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee, and she's co-chair of the Smart Cities Caucus. And Representative Adriano Espaillat is a member of the House Small Business Committee and the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. And they're both engaged in so many different caucuses out there, but we tried to pick up some of the highlights. But let me just start with you, Congresswoman Clarke. I'm sort of interested in taking the temperature of this question. Most small businesses I know don't spend all their day thinking about Washington, D.C. or regulators. In fact, they try to, whatever idea they're trying to bring forward, they're trying to sort of find their way, make business, pay their employees, get ahead, and they live in a kind of ecosystem of regulatory rules that they have to do, but they don't think about us. But right now we've got the pandemic going on, and we also have a time where social injustice, racial injustice is part of the, and we're looking at systemic inequality in the country. I'm just interested, what is the relationship between government and some of the businesses you're thinking about need to be tweaked, need to be better at?
Well, first of all, let me thank you for inviting me to be a part of this conversation today. There are multiple levels of government that we're talking about here, and certainly all of them have the responsibility and obligation to facilitate a healthy small business climate, whether it's the federal government, whether it's our state and municipalities. You rightly stated that the COVID-19 virus has devastated the state of New York. And as such, the challenges that our small business sector face are unprecedented. We've done the best that we can, I believe, at the federal level, the state level, the city level, to try to undergird and help give our small business sector a small landing, a soft landing, excuse me. But nothing has prepared us for the level of hardship that our small business sector is facing right now, alongside, of course, consumers and everyone else in our society. So I would say that we have an obligation to do everything we can right now to undergird our entrepreneurs, our small businesses, our mom and pop establishments that line all of our commercial corridors across this nation. And we need to act very swiftly.
Well, Congresswoman Clarke, the Congressman Hearn just talked about $135 billion of authorized appropriated money, in the small business sector that's sort of in there that both sides are trying to use as sweetener. I mean, do you see it the same way? Is that package something you support getting out there? And do you have confidence we will in time to save the bulk of these small businesses that are under such stress?
We're losing businesses each and every day. When you say in time was when we passed the HEROES Act way back in May. And unfortunately, yes, we are in a hyper political climate. And, our concern is that we're not selecting winners and losers, but that we have to undergird the economy by which our nation is faltering right now, whether it's high unemployment or it's the ability for customers to help support our small business sector by having the means to do so with such massive layoffs, such massive furloughs. You can't pick winners and losers. What we've looked at is a comprehensive package in which the small business sector has been centered and focused, but without the ability to address the continued spread of the COVID-19 virus, which impacts every jurisdiction around this nation. If people are spreading this virus, they're unable to actually help the economy. They're unable to work. We're overloading our hospital systems. It continues to have a bearing on a healthy small business economy. So addressing small business without addressing those who have to utilize that small business, the climate in which everyone is operating, is foolhardy. And that's something that we must address. I believe it has to be comprehensive. There's no way that you can save one sector of the economy, thereby picking winners and saying that every other sector of the economy that has a bearing on that portion of the economy, well, you'll have to wait.
Right.
It just doesn't make sense.
Right. Now, Congressman Espaillat, I have been moderating so many different forums about this period of time, what's happening in business and people's lives, how they're teaching their kids. And so much has been shoved online. We used to talk about being a digital country. We weren't. Now we are. But my friend Larry Irving was on with me the other day. He is from New York. He grew up in New York, used to be head of the National Telecommunications Infrastructure Administration. He said, see, where I grew up is still not connected, in an urban area. We can talk about urban-rural divide, and it is not even. It is very wobbly in the country. And so as we talk about e-commerce and small business, I'd love to hear from you where you think the gaps are in our understanding, so that as you're thinking about small businesses that are making it, do your other entrepreneurs out there have the schools, and the skills and connectivity they need?
Well, first and foremost, I agree with Congresswoman Clarke that this pandemic has been very tough, and we see what's happening in Europe right now, in cities like Madrid, where they're getting ready to lock down again. Where this is by far not over yet. And so this is a major hurdle as we begin to approach, for example, the restaurant business, which is looking to open soon in New York City at the 25% level. What can they do to open up their businesses safely? And what can the business community do so that indoor dining and other indoor activity, small business activity, doesn't contribute to a second spike in coronavirus cases here in New York City. So this is still very much among us. But yes, rural broadband is a problem, access to that. But it's also a problem locally in urban settings where you don't have 5G, when you don't have access to broadband. And that continues to be a major problem. We must do a major infrastructure bill that would address that problem nationally, not only in the rural areas, but also in the inner city areas as well. And small businesses often are impacted by this disparity that exists in terms of technology and access to broadband services and state-of-the-art technology services that we don't have when you compare us even to other countries that are doing far better than we are. But I think that one of the bigger problems that the small businesses in my district are facing is the fact that they weren't able to access the immediate help that we provided for them, the PPP forgivable loans. The traditional banking institutions went to their preferred customers, and that wasn't them. And I'm talking about the small mom and pops that have sometimes under 10 employees. Those are the businesses that provide the vast numbers of jobs across America. And they did not have access to this funding that was made available by SBA. It took us a second round of funding and $60 billion to ensure that the credit unions and the local banks that have a long-standing working relationship also with these businesses were able to give them that access to money. So they need another round of this funding. Many of them were shut down during the pandemic. It was only the essential businesses that were open in New York City: grocery stores, supermarkets, pharmacies, hardware stores, and the likes. But the other businesses were shut down. They're trying to reopen right now as we speak. And they may not have gotten this kind of funding, and many of them don't have access to, state-of-the-art technology that will make them competitive in e-commerce. So this is a great challenge for us as a district, of course, and a great challenge for America. I think it was over 6,000 businesses in my district that eventually benefited from PPP, but I think it should have been a lot more.
Let me ask you both kind of, I don't know how I'm going to phrase this, but I want to ask you, Congresswoman Clarke, you're a member of the Congressional Black Caucus. Congressman Espaillat, you're involved in the Hispanic Caucus. So I'd like to talk about, that for a moment, that when I'm just wondering, as we talk about so many businesses, getting in the e-commerce space, getting new platforms. Almost every business I know that's pivoted in a slightly better way has figured out what their online strategy is going to be. Does this give, I don't know how to put it, does this give companies in communities of color that have grown in toxic times, who've grown in where we've seen systemic discrimination and systemic racism and limits with financing in both communities, does this give them an opportunity to leapfrog out of those environments, or is that naive on my part to think that might be a possibility? Congresswoman Clarke?
Yeah, I think that what we see in the physical world, people also experience in the virtual world. And the realities are that until we develop algorithms that are developed without baked-in discrimination, the tools utilized by successful firms on the e-commerce platforms will elude communities of color. And, there's discrimination, unfortunately, is baked into so many avenues of our lives that it really makes it far more challenging. One would believe that, counterintuitively, that it would be a level playing field. But, we understand that these platforms are created through the use of algorithms and a whole host of other companies that bake bias into how they rank companies on platforms. When one is looking for a particular good or service, how Googling or using search engines determine placement within those search engines. So there's a lot more work to be done in the virtual space to root out discrimination as well. I also want to indicate that when communities are left behind in the education space, when they are left behind in the technology space, making that leap from brick and mortar becomes a bit more challenging than one who may have begun their entrepreneurial ventures online. So that translation from brick and mortar into that virtual platform is still elusive in many communities of color.
Congressman Espaillat, what does your map on that look like?
Well, it should be a level playing field, but it's not. And I'm really proud of the resilience that our small businesses have because they've done so well, basically barehanded, right? And technology should be a level playing field, but it's not. And in fact, our data is used in many ways that often leave us out and don't provide the kind of opportunities that should be provided for our small businesses. These platforms are often that they don't provide the language access that is necessary for our client base, our customer base. New York City, for example, is a very diverse city, but we're still far behind in providing language access in technology to many of our customer base. And so, whereas one part of the city may benefit from a particular platform or a particular development in technology in the virtual world, we often see that community and often immigrant communities that speak other languages lag behind. And so it should be a level playing field for everybody, and all ships should rise at the same time. But the reality is that it's not. And it will require our intervention in Congress to promote legislation and public policy that will level that playing field.
Well, look, one other thing, and this is a program we're exploring, the e-commerce dimensions, e-commerce platforms, but there are the realities of this. And I just want to ask you, there are reports out today that the CDC has reversed its guidance yet again on the issue of what it just issued, was that COVID-19 is an aerosol, that it could be more than 6 feet distance we have, and what really matters are the air processors inside places in terms of this, which made me wonder, do we need to kind of find a way to help, resource-strapped small businesses find ways to solve their ventilation problems in their enterprises, particularly as we go into winter, thinking about restaurants, et cetera. Apparently, in the last hour or so, that guidance has been reversed again. So I guess I would ask you both of this as the legislative touch points for your constituents who are trying to find their own North Star between how to safely engage in commerce, both online but also brick and mortar. And we have institutions like the CDC where, it's on or off depending. How do you folks, what sorts of things do you think we need to be doing today that we're not? Because I got to tell you, it sometimes leaves me very confused. Congresswoman Clarke?
Yeah, we need to follow the science. Yeah. And I know it's very troubling in a time where our head agencies have become politicized. But the bottom line to it is that, ultimately we know that this virus is airborne. That has led to many states looking at how they work very closely with their institutions to upgrade their heating and ventilation systems. When a state like New York, where we're heading into our colder seasons, it has become an imperative. We're seeing this with our school system, and that will, of course, translate into concerns in hospital environments, in any enclosed facilities, whether they're restaurants or they are museums. We know that heating and ventilation is going to be critical to utilizing those spaces for humans to gather in any form or fashion. And so, everything that we've been trying to do through the HEROES Act, through the infrastructure bill that we've passed in the House of Representatives, is predicated on what we know the science has told us about this virus and how to beat it back and how to give guidance to all people, whether they're entrepreneurs or consumers, whether they're just everyday Americans. There are just some basic practices that have to be put into effect in order for us to have any semblance of normal life. And until then, we will all have to remain, sequestered, if you will, quarantined, until we can guarantee to the American people that the spaces that they enter and spend significant time in are healthy environments, places where they won't be susceptible or the risk has been minimized in terms of being able to contract COVID-19.
Right, Congressman Espaillat?
Yes, look, the world has changed, and as a result, we will have to change as well permanently. I remember how I used to look at folks from other parts of the world. I used to come into New York City with a mask on, kind of strangely, and now this is a common practice, and I look at folks that don't wear a mask strangely, and so the world has changed. And the ventilation system, for example, the New York City public school system has altered and changed its model 3 times already, this opening model 3 times. Science has not really gotten its arms around this virus yet and determined really what it is, or the long-term impacts of it. And apparently this was known, this new report that came out in terms of the virus and its airborne characteristics was known. But yes, we're going to have to invest, and we may have to provide capital dollars to places like restaurants and other folks that do businesses indoors. So they have the capacity to build the systems that will ensure safety to their customer base and that will give the confidence back to their clients and their customers to come back inside safely. I was watching how yesterday a very well-known Latino urban singer by the name of Bad Bunny the Congresswoman may know his music because I know she's a great dancer. Had a tour yesterday, a concert tour, except it wasn't in a big arena. It was in a flatbed truck. And it went through neighborhoods across the city of New York. It went to Harlem, Northern Manhattan, and the Bronx. And it was seen by millions of people online as he drove around in a flatbed doing his yearly tour that normally would have been done at a sold-out Madison Square Garden or a Barclay Arena. So these are the changing times, and we will have to adjust. And yes, government will have to provide the funding for businesses to make the safe adjustments for their customer base.
Look, we've all been around long enough that we remember people getting, their market front, in eBay or Amazon, whatever, and having an online strategy was an opportunity. Now it's become survival and, a health strategy, as you both know. And I think, that's part of what you're talking about in terms of, how this system and world is changing. I know, Congressman Espaillat, you've been working on supply chains. How do you basically make sure you get what you order and all of these other kinds of things that come into it? I hope you'll both come back. We're out of time now, but I hope you'll both come back and talk to me about the various dimensions. I really, really appreciate the scaffolding you have put around this topic. I'm very grateful. Congresswoman Yvette Clarke from New York, Congressman Adriano Espaillat of New York, thank you both so much for your thoughts today.